How's it going, everybody? Thank you for joining us this fine day. I got Rios in the house with me. How's it going, Rios?
Is it a fine day? I think if you're at NRG, you deserve financial compensation because, wow, I
Yeah.
decided lost for words for what I witnessed in person yesterday.
Yeah, it was a mess. There's no way to put it lightly whatsoever. It was such a downfall for the Texans. I mean, you managed to give Will Levis 8 sacks, one pick six. You had CJ Stroud with a costly interception. You had Kaimi Fairbairn, who was one of the most consistent kickers, miss a chip shot really, and a few a few defensive busts here and there. Obviously, the missed tackles are there. And what happened to the Texans run game? Joe Mixon with 22 yards rushing.
They went MIA. It's on a milk carton right now. Have you seen
Exactly.
this person?
All that, the combination of many things. But back to your point, if you're a fan of NRG, man, you deserve some financial compensation.
Or at least, a free drink or something.
Yeah. So, man, how's the fan base feeling out there, Rios?
So let me go on a little bit of I want to call it a respectful rant. So the fan base, from what I've seen on social media and talking to people, in my office and at the store, it's all over the place. Like you have the far spectrum that of fans that want to bench CJ, they want to fire DeMeco, and then you got the other side that's well, they're gonna figure it out. Again, it's not that bad. Blah blah blah. I'm like, guys, as a fan, one of your rights is you do have the right to criticize your team. It's one of those things like you don't accept in victory what you wouldn't accept in defeat. When the team played Dallas, and I had told my friends that this is one of the ugliest 34-10 wins I've ever seen as a spectator of the sport. And they're like, "What do you mean?" I was like, "It's really a tale of two halves." Because that first half, that game was, it could have went either way. It was just sloppy on both sides of the ball for Houston. But it's like, well, they're doing good. Like they were bad for so long, and just trying to make excuses. I'm like, it's okay, like because we know players, we know current players, we know former players, we know former coaches, people that have been in and around the sports media, and they all say the same thing. Like the players hear the outside noise. They'll tell you they don't, but they do because they all have friends and family that have social media. They obviously talk to them. They hear this stuff, and this stuff moves up the chain. And like, obviously, ownership is going to hear stuff like that as well because it's just they're going to hear it not just maybe from their family members or the fans, but they're also going to hear it from like their sponsors. Like, hey, what's going on? Like, we see a lot of empty seats. We're hearing this, and that. Like, it all works its way up. So it is okay to criticize the team, especially when they're not doing well, especially when they are not meeting expectations. I think perhaps the expectations for this team was a little bit higher than it should have been, but I digress. And I think the general, John McClain, he said it best. He said he said it on this show. This team is not a contender. And
Yeah,
he's looking right so far. And
yeah,
people are justly right to criticize the team because they are not playing well. And it's across the board. It's not just point the finger at one person. Oh, this person's fault. No, it is a multitude of factors that is affecting this entire team from top to bottom, starting from the general manager all the way down to even the people that work the field. Like they showed a picture earlier on Twitter where the lines like zigzag, like it's not even a straight line on the sideline, and the Titans complained about it because it's like, bro, like that's high school level stuff. Like that's how inept it's been. One of my favorite phrases when we first started covering content for the Texans was this was back in 2022 when the team was very bleak to say the least. I used to say they were it was just a master class of ineptitude, and it's really starting to revert back to that in some aspects, not the entire franchise per se, but in some aspects it really does feel that way. And listening to some of these coaches say, it's like perfect example in Coach DeMeco's presser today. They had asked him about the inability to make adjustments and what did they plan to change before this upcoming Sunday's game against the Jaguars and heading into the bye week. And his just to paraphrase his quote, basically is saying they don't need to change anything. They just have to execute better. Execute is one of those words. It is going up there in the lores of tough, smart, dependable. If you've been a fan of this team, you know you've heard that phrase and you've heard it all ad nauseum. And yeah, it's just all right, ran over. But yeah, no, it's one of those things like because we're all fans of one of the 32 teams in the league. Whether you're a fan of this team or that team, it is okay to criticize your team. Doesn't make you any less of a fan. I do get a little perplexed when someone who basically tries to gatekeep fandom. Like you can be a fan and still be critical of a team. You can analyze. You can like what we do. It doesn't matter what team we're a fan of. We look at it a little bit differently through a different lens, so we can criticize it. Not just analytically and critically, but like basically break it down and make it easy to understand for other people. And it's okay. Like you're not any less of a fan if you say something negative about your team. It doesn't take away from your quote unquote fandom. It's at the end of the day, we all have eyes. We all see the same things. Like, but yeah, that's the end of my little rant.
All right. Rant brought to you by Rios. No, anyway, so I wanted to talk a little bit about CJ Stroud. Listen, it's no secret. He said it himself. You can look at the numbers. CJ Stroud, it's fair to say there's been regression or sophomore slump, if you will. There has been regression. I'm looking at some of the numbers right now.
Speaking of sophomore slumps, I think Michael Schwab put it best. He's sophomore Jeremy Pena. Watch the Astros. Jeremy Pena went from being a World Series MVP to being dropped down in the order to near the bottom. And I think we're seeing that same with CJ.
Yeah,
not
so
playable, but yeah.
So as I was saying, so CJ Stroud last year played 15 games, missed a couple of them due to injury. And I'm looking at his completion. He had like 319 completions, 400 out of 499 attempts, gave him a 63.9 completion rating. Ended the season last season with 4,108 yards. Was averaging about 8.2 yards. Had 23 touchdowns and an incredible 5 interceptions. Longest one was 75 yards. And his sacks, he only got sacked 38 times last season. His passer rating was 100.8. 100.8. And his quarterback rating was 58.3. Pretty good numbers for a rookie.
Phenomenal numbers, really.
Phenomenal numbers. This season, he's played, and this is in 12 games, by the way. In 12 games, 250 completions, 396 out of 396 attempts, which puts his completion rating at about 63.1. That's about the same. Very not too much of a change there. Yardage, though, he's at 2,875. Okay, still a few games left. I don't think he'll probably get that much as he did that first season. The average, how many yards per pass attempt was 8.2 last season. This season, 7.3. Mm-hmm. So 23 touchdowns last season, currently at 14. Last season, 5 interceptions. He's currently at 9. Longest pass of 67 yards. And remember the sack number that I just gave you from last season, 38? Mm-hmm. He's at 39. His passer rating went down to an 87.3. And his adjusted quarterback rating has gone down from a 58.3 to a 51.3. So the numbers are yes, you can put it up to, well, there's more tape on him. Yes. He has regressed. There are some decision-making skills, especially this past Sunday against the Titan, where it was like, I understand. It felt like a lot of miscommunication was happening between CJ Stroud and the offense. Point blank. I think what is upsetting most for everybody is the fact that you had for 2 consecutive games now, since Nico Collins has been back, 2 big plays, one against Dallas. I was there at that Dallas game, and immediately when they threw the flag, Then again, this past weekend when I was at the Titans game, the same thing. They threw a flag. It nullified a Nico Collins touchdown.
again.
I mean,
And this is
back
a
to
key
back
winner.
weeks.
And this
Back
last
to back weeks.
a
This
game.
is that is detrimental to Nico Collins because on back from his hamstring injury, you get a call, you get a play call, and he gets nullified. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the Cowboys it must have been, it was an off. I think it was an ineligible receiver downfield, and I think it was Laramie Tunsil.
It was Larry.
There you go. Surprise, surprise. Then you have this past week, CJ Stroud calls. I think he was going to call for Joe Mixon, and I think somehow along the lines there was miscommunication, and it was an illegal shift that brought back a Nico Collins touchdown. Those are basic fundamental. That's just discipline.
Big time.
Seth Payne said it himself. That's just discipline. Those are easy things that can be fixed for them, but that's just a lack of discipline, like lack of communication at that in a crucial key moment. I mean, he's. I mean, yes, I understand the play calling comes from Bobby Slowik. I get it, but at the end, I mean, CJ has some control, you know. But I think, and then some of those, I get the fact that the offensive line hasn't given him much to work with. I get it. I get that his awareness is off. I mean, for goodness sake, everybody saw the Dan Orlovsky play with CJ Stroud. It's just lack of awareness. At that point, I mean, what can you say? It's a lack of awareness, you know?
Yeah, it was bad.
It was bad. So it's apparent. It's apparent that CJ Stroud is going through regression. I think it's now fair to say, and it's okay to admit that. Going back to your point, Reels, it's okay to admit that there's a regression. You know? How do they get better? How do the Texans fix this? And that's the question that everybody's asking. How do they fix it? If you let go of the offensive coordinator, how much of a difference does it make when there's still a few games? I'll agree with you on this. I agree with General John McClain when he came on the show. At the moment, I wasn't seeing that side when he said it, but now, at the moment, now when you look at it, it's all the things that have become so apparent. It's like, you know what? The Texans team is not a playoff contender. They're not a playoff contender, and there's I think what's kind of upsetting is when you hear with the backstage interviews in the locker room, they've interviewed I think it was Landry Locker interviewed Titus Howard or Cody Stew's one of those guys, and it was more like, well, we just got to get better. We know what we need to fix, and we need to get better. Okay. Shaq Mason was also interviewed. I think this was, if I'm not mistaken, it might have been by Aaron Wilson. And same thing. It was like we just need to get better. It's the typical answer that you're supposed to give.
Yeah, PR basically.
Correct. And however, it's just like, what's going on, guys? It's this, like, if it's really that, what is contributing to this not meshing? I think Shaq Mason said it can be up and down, can't ride the roller coaster. Like, it, what are we talking about here, fellas? Like,
as Bobby Slowik famously said, football is football.
Yeah, I just I don't understand that, and I think the lack of repairs. Going back to CJ, one of CJ's quotes was, "We use it as one game out of the year that will teach us a lesson. Sadly, we have to learn it right now. It will teach us in the future years. For me, I'm going to use this as a time where I need to look at myself in the mirror and get better." Listen, taking the blame, admitting there's a problem, that's how you start to fix something. CJ Stroud, yeah, that's leadership right there, taking the blame, pinpointing out himself. You could tell the frustration on CJ Stroud, but
sidelines, like
you saw it on the sidelines, very different from last season. Again, there seems to be so much miscommunication to execute, and it almost seemed like when I was at the Titans game, I was like, you know what? When they couldn't get past 20 points in that first half, it seemed like I was like, ooh, they're in for big trouble, because in the second half, there's really no adjustments that are going to be made.
Nope.
And there was no offensive scoring at all in the second half. And you brought it up. Not long ago. The offense couldn't move past midfield in the second half at all.
Yeah, that was the most glaring thing of all the research I did for today's show. Like all of everything that I looked up, all the numbers, all the interviews, all that. The one that stood out the most, the offense couldn't get past midfield. Now, someone say, "Oh, well, they had field goal attempts." Yes, because the defense gave them excellent starting field position inside the 50. The offense on their own did not get there, and to walk away with 0 touchdowns, 1 field goal in the entire second half, that's just unacceptable.
And going back to CJ, I mean, he had 2 interceptions against the Titans, which, by the way, didn't have Snead in the secondary.
No,
like that was one of the. If you were to predict this game, while so many people made so many people picked the Texans to beat the Titans over the weekend before Sunday, a lot of people picked the Texans to win because they didn't really have Snead in the back in the secondary. So they were just thinking, okay, he's gonna air the ball out. You got Nico Collins there. Let me go back really quick to the CJ Stroud, and he had 2 interceptions. I think Aaron Wilson asked CJ Stroud on his 2 interceptions, and he said, and I quote, "The first one, I couldn't really see Metch. I tried to put it in the window, and we just weren't on the same page. Can't do that right there. That's giving them points, which ultimately led us to lose. Then the second one, I just kind of put it a little higher. If I gave it to him, Nico has a lot of space to run. Two mistakes I made that can't happen." It seems like it's been just a lot of mistakes all around, not just with them two, but just in particular that John Mechie one. We were right. I was nearby that one.
Yeah, it was on our side.
It was on the on the left side of the field or whatever. And so it seemed like the miscommunication. That's why I keep saying miscommunication, because CJ aired it and then like Mechie settled. He did. In some ways, I think CJ thought John Mechie was going to just keep going,
and he didn't.
But he did, and he just settled an interception right then and there.
From my angle, he tried to do a no-look pass, and which is you
can't that too.
You can't do that on that side of the field. You can't be reckless like that.
Yeah. All in all, I just don't think. When I looked back at that game, I don't think they really prepared efficiently for the Titans. I think they do what they're known to do, and that's just play to the level of competition.
What do you think? Last season against the Panthers, giving them one of their only 2 wins last year. They did it against the Falcons. They made Desmond Ridder look like Matt Ryan out there. He had a career day, and Will Levis had the best game of his season so far.
Yeah,
it's baffling.
I mean,
this goes back to my little rant earlier. It is okay to criticize Stroud. He is not, even to he'll admit it himself, he has not played up to his standards.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't mean that we think that he's a bad quarterback. He's not that he's not good. No, he's having a down year. It happens. It happens in every walk of life, in any job that you have. Sometimes you have it, sometimes you don't. That's just how life is. Not everyone. No one bats 1,000 using a baseball analogy. No one bats 1,000. It's having a down year. It happens. Now, how he bounces back is going to be telling him, what type of quarterback he'll end up becoming.
Yeah, at this point, it's the rough days, the dog days of this. It is a slump. There is a sophomore slump. It is real. He's going through it. It's like you said. He's gonna how he picks up for himself from it. What they do in the off season is definitely going to be what the Texans see, what's going to come into fruition for the future generation. This is the Super Bowl window for the Texans. You got the rookie quarterback who still hasn't gained that big contract yet, but it's close. He's getting there. Yeah. So it's almost like it's your race against time, and it's just how prepared are the Texans to be legitimate contenders. On paper, this offseason, they look legitimate. But that was on paper. On defense, I got to admit, that defense is stellar right now. Yes, they're missing John Mechie. Yes, they've had a few I apologize, John Mechie. Jalen Petrie now. He's going to be out for a while with a partially torn pec. So they didn't rule him out for the season. I thought they would because of a pec injury. but they ended up. DeMeco said a few. He's gonna miss some weeks. So I mean, you might get him back later, but
All playing
I
is safe
want.
to see if they do make a deep playoff run. They don't want to put them on injury reserve because that they
Yeah,
believe they only have one injury
one
reserve designation left, so they don't want to like use it up just yet. So they're wanting
correct.
to wait and see how the season plays out, which is smart. I'll give them that.
Correct. And so I felt Jalen Petrie's presence missed, especially when the Titans scored that touchdown to tight end. I can't remember the name off the top of my head. Uh, yeah. And that's where you line up Jalen Petrie in the line of scrimmage. That's where he's needed. In coverage, not the best. Man coverage, not the best. But when Petrie is lined up in the line of scrimmage, that star position that he was a Baylor, he's that's been his best role this season. That's what has attributed to Petrie playing out of his mind in some games. Um, as far as that, I honestly I kept thinking with Christian Harris returning after the bye week, I felt like that role was going to diminish or they were going to slowly ease Christian Harris back in because I mean Jalen Petrie was playing hybrid outside linebacker / safety. But with Christian Harris, I mean, the thing with the defense though, I I I put the defense in the elite level because no matter how many guys they have on injury, they're able to keep going,
They figure
uh,
it out.
as opposed to the offense. Like offense, like they don't seem to adjust, and I
Mhm.
think that's something that falls with DeMeco because it feels like DeMeco oversees the offense and the defense, but it feels like he hasn't missed a step when it comes to the defense, and it's almost like we're kind of neglecting the offense a bit.
It's
Like
taken
how
a big step back this season for sure.
correct, it's a big step back on the offense, and again, it's okay to say what you see, and that's how I feel because with the offense, they're elite. They're an elite defense. They're a top 5 defense right now. The Texans defense is.
No, most definitely. You got two guys that are top 5 in
Yeah.
sacks. You have a cornerback duo of Stingley and uh, Lassiter that they rank among the top as far as coverage, allowing the fewest completions, low QBR, whatever you want to use. Like they are top 5 as well. Like they have pieces in place as far as their
Yeah.
cornerstones on defense.
So
It's just
Rios, I know I had mentioned the offense not being productive or whatnot, and the defense is. Can you shed some light on what's happening with the offense?
yeah. So another stat that stood out to me. We've all known we've almost been beating a dead horse at this point about the second half struggles of this team this entire season. But I didn't realize how bad those struggles were until like you actually like see it in black and white. So on the season, Houston is averaging 9 points a game in the second half. 9 points. Basically, you're averaging field goals. They only have 2 offensive touch. Well, so they scored an offensive touchdown against the Cowboys, but I mean that was in garbage time. The game was already out of hand at that point. So me personally, I don't really count that. So in my eyes, we have not scored. They have not scored an offensive touchdown in several weeks now, going back to when Nico Collins went down, basically almost 6 weeks, and very little production in the second half as far as touchdowns go. The defense is giving up 13 points, which on paper doesn't seem bad, but when the offense is only averaging 9 points in the second half, you're almost asking the defense and special teams to essentially play perfect in the second half to, basically negate the negative play of the offense. But it's a tall task to ask because eventually, as we saw with the Titans, they controlled the trenches, they controlled the time of possession, they controlled the line of scrimmage, and it eventually led to them winning the game. Like you can't rely on the defense. Like the offense has to be able to, put up points on the board. And so I was looking a little bit deeper into as far as why the offense is struggling. Mine, Nico was out for a while, but even with that, so one of the reporters for Fox, Will Kunkel, so he had put something out that I found pretty interesting. So the league average as far as separating, the league average is 2.97 yards. That's what Nico averages as far as separation goes. So he's at the league average. So he's one of the few on the team that's able to create separation. From there, it goes down to next closest one is John Mechie at 1.73 yards. That is almost half the league average.
Neck and neck, yeah.
And then right below him is Tank Dell at 1.31 yards. So what that tells me is that the receivers outside of Nico Collins are not able to get separation. And then it also ties into the play calling. So you have a wide receiver core, especially after losing Stephon Diggs, because he was elite at creating separation. Now that you have a receiver core that's outside of Nico Collins, they struggle to get separation. It's not even close to the league average. So they're struggling in that department. And then the offense is calling these overtly complicated schemes that involve 7-step drops. But when the offensive line is being pressured, giving a 40% pressure rate, it is a recipe for what we've seen on the field so far. It's just sloppy football. Not a lot of completions, not being able to move the ball, not to be able to control the time of possession. And, tying into the play calling. So Tennessee, the strength of their defense is their front four. You got Tavondre Sweat and Jeffrey Simmons, two of the best at, creating pressure, disrupting the line of scrimmage, and stopping the run. So you would think the heart of their defense is stopping the run. The Titans were missing their best corner. Logic would say this would be a perfect game to air it out at home. That is not what happened. They were still trying to establish the run well into the fourth quarter while behind. You had Joe Mixon, who's been phenomenal all season, but he's been shut down a couple times. But again, this has been by teams that are good at stopping the run. The Detroit Lions and the Tennessee Titans. So on the day, he had 14 carries for 22 yards. Averaged less than 2 yards a carry. What was the number? Like 1.8, 1.7?
1.7, I believe.
1.7. League average is, around 4 yards. I mean, that's just it was not his day. But there's different ways they could have utilized Joe Mixon, but I have yet to really see this season. You can line them up wide, spread them out. That way you kind of reduce the pressure rate because they're all spread out, so you can kind of see who's going to be blitzing. They still continue to run these condensed formations, these 7-step drops when your offensive line is struggling to protect your quarterback and basically maintain the line of scrimmage for more than 2 seconds. And you get what you saw yesterday, just a sloppy offensive performance. And it was really telling at the end of the game on the line, 3rd and 17, you're inside your 5-yard line. You call a play that basically has Stroud backing up all the way to the back of the end zone and pulling it off Orlowski. Now, I will say it's not 100% fully on Stroud. If you look at the tape, Laramie Tunsil just basically got pushed. I mean, not Laramie Tunsil, excuse me. Titus Howard got pushed into him. Like he got pushed all the way back and kind of blocked, Stroud's basically for him to be able to get out of the pocket, and he had nowhere to go but the back of the end zone. It's that play basically sums up. They shoot themselves in the foot, and that play encapsulates what that means. Like
it's offensive line struggles too. They continue to soar. Like I think one player in particular, Shaq Mason, who the Texans signed last season, coming from the Super Bowl, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I think he was in that Super Bowl with them when they went with Tom Brady. So one interesting fact that friend BT put out, and he said Shaq Mason has never given up more than 32 pressures and 4 sacks in a season. Last season, in this same scheme, he gave up 32 pressures and 3 sacks. This season, already has given up 31 pressures and 7 sacks. Here's a kicker. You ready? That's with having 300 less snaps compared to last season's, since there's so much football still left.
The math's not mathing right now.
I mean,
that's another one that's also regressed, and because you saw him in his Tampa Bay days, he's obviously a little bit past his prime, but I mean the level of regression from him has been eye-popping.
And it's the same scheme. Like nothing really changed. It's the same type of scheme.
Well, something I saw that was pretty interesting is someone I can't remember if it was Seth Payne or Pendergrass, but one of them put like a lot of the teams that are running the Shanahan offense are struggling to run it because teams have caught on to it. It's one of those things where like a bunch of teams, they use the same offensive scheme, and then defenses come up way to stop it. Like we saw
Mhm.
years ago when Greg Roman and the pistol offense, that was a rage all over the NFL. All these teams started using it. And then defenses figured out how to stop it, and they had to move away from that, and they went on to the next thing, which has been the Shanahan offense. Now, outside of the 49ers, because they have the offensive line to run that with, essentially an undrafted guy like Jordan Mason come in and be a league leader in rushing for a while till they got McCaffrey back.
Yeah.
Like you have to have the personnel to run a zone gap scheme, and I think VT said it. Like Shaq Mason's he doesn't really fit in the zone gap scheme. Like that's not his forte.
Yeah, and that's that's how it is. I mean, the Texans were back up on 40% on the quarterback pressure percentage. They allowed 4 sacks and 16 quarterback pressures against the Titans. The Texans are still remaining third place in pressure percentage allowed and fourth in sacks allowed. No team has allowed more quarterback pressures. I mean, that tells you that tells you a lot. That was by Cody Suits, by the way. That tells you a lot. And so
no adjustments.
there's no adjustments in the second half, and it shows. It really does show. I think one line that did bother me a little bit about DeMeco when he said, and I think it's been all over Twitter. It's been all over because it's something that he said, and you gotta. It kind of makes you think, huh? What's really happening? It just it was along the lines of that the offense scored enough points. And the offense scored enough points. Yeah, that's what it was. Our offense did plenty. They gave us enough points. I honestly don't know. I don't know about that.
Look, I get not wanting to throw a certain unit under the bus, but I mean, in hindsight, to me, it feels like he's throwing the defense under the bus a little bit, and which is not fair. Just to give you an idea of how inept the offense was in the second half. So in the second half, Houston had 54 yards of offense. 54 yards. That's not even high school numbers. They scored 3 total points, 4 first downs the entire second half. Like I mentioned earlier, they never crossed midfield on their own. And like you had mentioned, the 40% pressure rate. That was constant throughout the game. Like they didn't make adjustments. Tennessee didn't make adjustments. I think Seth Payne put out. So what the Titans did, because I think who was it? One of the reporters asked. It was Cody Stutes that asked. Patterson. He asked Patterson, what did Tennessee do different? So I guess whatever their game plan was, Tennessee did something completely different. They adjusted. Because Jared Patterson was essentially said that they did something. They weren't expecting them to play like that.
Correct.
And so they did a pretty good breakdown, basically saying that the linebackers for the Titans, they were. Let me get the exact quote. So the linebackers stayed on the backside of the zone runs, anticipating the cutback. Because essentially, with the zone run, once you make that cutback, that's where the majority of the yards are going to come from at the second level. The linebackers stayed back. Like the Titans didn't blitz a whole lot. They got a lot of pressure with just their front four, which Houston does as well. But with them, like the linebackers, they were essentially trying to stop the cutback runs. And they did, obviously, because Mixon averaged less than 2 yards a carry. And the reason they did that is because they said that they anticipated the Texans offensive line not being able to block, not just the offensive line, but also the tight ends, not being able to block the front side. Which I won't read the whole code because it does have an expletive in it, but basically saying like the Titans knew that the Texans have struggled with just basic blocking assignments, and I think there was one play that it was just the Bobby being a little too cute with the offensive protections. You got all these guys shifting. You have basically 7 guys guarding 5 rushers, and somehow one guy you have a free rusher. Like that doesn't make sense. 7 against 5, you would think they'd be able to stop it, but no, like they had all these switches at the very end, and Titus Howard looked confused out there, and the guy just ran right by him and was able to. I can't remember if he got pressure on Stroud or if he was able to sack him, but I mean, like it just. I think someone put it on I was in one of the spaces earlier on Twitter, and someone was like, they need to like just basically dumb down the offense because it's a little too complicated. They're trying to be a little too cute, and it hasn't worked. It's week 13. Your offense is bottom 10 as far as scoring, yards, not just the second half, but overall for the entirety of the game. And I don't see that game plan change against the Jaguars.
Yeah.
That bye week is going to be very critical. That's going to determine how the rest of their season plays out.
100%. I think what they're going to have to do is it seemed like they almost underestimated the Titans, right? It seemed like they underestimated them. They weren't really, it's not that they weren't prepared. I just think that they just underestimated the Titans. And the term any given Sunday is real, you know?
Sure.
Any given Sunday is real. You can say what you want about anybody can say anything they want about Will Levis or anybody in the Titans. The thing is they executed. The Texans didn't. You know, they executed and they got the job done and they ended up winning. Yes, the Texans contributed to it. They, you know, with their own mistakes, they got, you know, the Titans in their right gave the Texans enough opportunities to win. The crucial pick six that Jimmy Ward took all the way to the house was the thing. Being sacked 8 times was something that the Texans could have taken advantage of. The defense, even at the last drive, they put the Texans in wonderful position to, with enough time, put the Texans offense, in great position to get the drive going and get enough points to either go to overtime or win the game. The defense showed up. They made adjustments in the second half. Yes, in the first half, the defense wasn't up to par or didn't do anything. But in the second half, the defense, you know, they were locked in. They were making plays. The only like the touchdown in the second half. Yes, there was a touchdown in the second half, but not by the offense, by Jimmy Ward of the defense.
Yep.
You know,
put them the defense outscoring
back. Exactly, and that's the thing. And when you start seeing these explosive plays, I think you and I have gone over happen on the defensive side of the ball. It's because the offense is going 3 and out. You don't give the defense enough time to rest. So they're worn out by the time they're out there. And guess what? They're still making plays. They're still sacking Will Levis. Yeah, I'll give credit to the Titans. They did enough to win the game. They did enough to win the game, and that's fair to say.
No, but going back to your point of the offense not doing its job. So Houston had 9 drives on Sunday that lasted less than 2 minutes. Like, you're not going to win games with this type of sequence. You score a touchdown, great. Then punt, field goal, interception, punt, interception, punt, field goal, safety.
Exactly.
That was the sequence of events that how the game ended, and all of those plays took less than 2 minutes. Like, you can't complain about them scoring a touchdown quickly, but everything else, all those drives were less than 2 minutes. And with, you know, Tony Pollard having a career day, like,
yeah,
he had, let me got the numbers right here. Tony Pollard, I know he had over 100 yards. Let's see. Where is it? Yeah. So Tony Pollard had 119 yards rushing, 1 touchdown on 24 carries. You know, pretty good carry rate. But he had a career high 5 explosive runs. What an explosive run is something that goes over 10 yards running. So he had 5 runs of over 10 yards. Best of his career. Yeah. Which, again, Houston is a pretty stout run defense, but in the first half, Tennessee scored on the first 3 possessions of the game. They were just running it down their throats. They were, you know, basically having their way with Houston at that point. The defense made adjustments in the second half. They were able to. They only had 1 sack in the second half, but they had 7 in the first half. Like, as the game progressed, they really started to turn up the intensity on the defense side of the ball. They got turnovers. They did more than enough to win the game. But when you have those last 9 possessions for Houston, where that just fumble, interception, punt, safety, like, you're not beating many teams, let alone the elite teams of the AFC, like the Baltimores, the Kansas Cities. Like, you're not winning with that formula.
No, not at all. If the Texans, literally what's missing, I don't want to say what's missing, but in order for them to be good, to be labeled as contenders, they got to change up what's happening in the offense. That's it. You're there defensively. I believe defense can hang with the best of the best. I'm not ready to give up on the defense. I think I told you this coming back from the Titans game. Reels and I had gone together. Not together, but whatever. We were there. But coming back, like I mentioned, I'm not ready to give up on the defense yet. I think the defense can hang with the best of the best, proven by the Detroit game.
Yeah.
I think the defense is still solid. They're elite. But if the Texans want to be labeled as contenders, that the offense has to make some drastic changes. And yes, you kept hearing it all, with Patterson. You kept hearing it with Titus Howard. You kept hearing it with Shaq Mason. But they know if Juice Scruggs also, who was also interviewed and said they know what are the adjustments that they need to make.
It's week 13.
It's not happening. It's week 13. There's only a few more weeks left in the regular season. And I don't think this is a team that's going to make a deep playoff run. I think this is the team that, they're in the AFC South, which is a bad division to say the least.
There's only
and you're the best of the bad teams right now. And so I don't see them making a deep playoff run. Miraculously, I hope I'm proven wrong. Like straight up, like I hope that I'm proven wrong about that. But I don't think the Texans are going to be a team that's going to make a deep playoff run, if anything. And I'm not the only one to say that. Every other analyst is saying the exact same thing.
And it's okay to say that.
And it's okay to say it because it's you're supposed to call it out how it is. And it just doesn't seem. I don't see them making a deep playoff run. That's all it is. I don't see them making a deep playoff run.
Like the only way this team makes a deep, so this team reminds me a lot of the 07 New York Giants. They barely scraped their way into the playoffs. They kind of struggled for the majority of the season.
Yeah,
they started to turn it on the last few weeks, and they really turned it up in the playoffs. And they ended up defeating the undefeated Patriots that year. I think that's the only way this Houston team makes a deep playoff run. They go on some type of run like we've seen it happen multiple times over the course of our lives. Basically, we've seen a team that no one really expected to be there, and ended up, shocking the world.
Mm-hmm.
The Giants did it twice against Tom Brady. Tom Brady would have 9 Super Bowl rings if it wasn't for Eli Manning.
Yeah,
which is crazy to say, but I mean that's from my perspective. That's the only way this team makes a deep playoff run is just a little bit of luck. Because as far as schematic changes at this point of the season, there's not much they can really do. I think any major schematic changes or personnel changes, it's going to happen in the offseason. Mm-hmm. It's going to be an interesting one for sure because there's a lot that needs to be addressed.
Definitely a lot that will happen in the offseason. We're still not there, but definitely a lot of changes I think are going to be made in the offseason as well. All right, as you see at the bottom of your screen there, please subscribe to our YouTube channel right here if you want to keep hanging out with us at BBlitzPod. Also follow us on our Instagram account at BBlitzPod, where we share plenty content along from our Esquina as well, which it's college football things that we share, little clips, little highlights here and there. So follow us up also as well, just like on our X account at BBlitzPod. It's all the same right there. Follow us up. This is all part of the our Esquina network right there. Follow them on the Instagram at our Esquina, and of course follow our Esquina on their X account as well, just as you see it there. Pretty good stuff, highlighting Latino voices in the sports world, some players that you might not have heard before. Check them out, man. It's a lot of fun, a lot of great things happening at our Esquina. That's going to be it for us this week. Actually, I take that back. We're not finished yet. Here's why. Jaguars. Texans have against the Jaguars real quick. No, it's fine because it's a prediction. I want you. Here's what's going to happen. The Jaguars are the worst team in the AFC South right now, record wise. Okay, it's true. It's not calling that anything out. It's true. Yeah. It's factual. However, any given Sunday rule still applies. I hope that this was a small wake up lesson. It should have been a wake up lesson when they lost against the Jets, to be fair. But I think this needs to be a wake-up lesson for the Houston Texans, because if they lose against the Jacksonville Jaguars,
the division starts to basically be a realistic possibility of them losing it to the Colts, because the Colts have a fairly easy schedule.
5-7, right? They're 5-7 out of the Colts, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah.
I mean,
So
they would have to essentially win out, but they have a fairly easy schedule
mhm,
record-wise, and
mhm.
they could go on a run as well. Like, Anthony Richardson's starting to, play a little bit better. They have pieces in place just like Houston does.
They
They
do.
have the ability to go on a run.
They
Will
do.
they? That remains to be seen, but
Mhm.
they do have the pieces in place to make a small
They
run, and if
do.
Houston loses on Sunday, your season could be in jeopardy because the AFC is very, very, very competitive. Essentially, winning your division guarantees you in, obviously. But for
Yeah.
Houston, if they don't win a division, you got teams like the Ravens that may not win their division, but they're going to be double-digit wins.
Well, yeah.
You got the Chargers who are playing really, really well under Harbaugh. They probably
Mhm.
finished 10 or 11 wins as well. And those guys aren't division leaders.
Yeah.
And you have the Broncos. That's the surprise
It's
team of
been
this
a surprise team, the Denver Broncos, exactly. So
playing.
the
Those are
Texans,
three teams
it's
right there. So if you
yeah.
lose division, they're going to be on the outside looking in.
So honestly, I'm gonna say this right now. If the Texans have a little bit of fire under them after the loss to Tennessee, because I'm pretty sure ownership wasn't too happy with that because of the rivalry there.
Yeah.
So I hope that there's a little bit more of a fire lit up. I hope that there is some changes in the offense. Will it happen? Probably not. But based on the consistency that how that's been so consistent that they're
The
not
one,
just able to adjust.
the one,
If anything, right? I don't. I I would I would see the Texans. What's crazy is that I could see the Texans losing against the Jacksonville Jaguars if they start playing down a competition again.
no,
Isn't it crazy to say that out loud?
it does feel crazy to say it out loud, but it's true. Like, so the Vegas odds, Houston was 7-point favorites against Tennessee.
Exactly.
They ended up losing by 3. I'm pretty sure Vegas wasn't happy about that, but whoever bet on Tennessee, they won big, obviously.
Yeah.
Now against Jacksonville, they're 5.5-point favorites.
5.5, right? Yeah.
I mean, outside of the Dallas game and the Patriots game, Houston was heavily favored and they won,
Mhm.
pretty fairly easily. This
Mhm.
one is going to be a real test to see, like, you're heading into your bye week.
Yes.
Like a lot of them said, they got to look at the man in the mirror and decide what kind of
Yeah.
team they want to be. I mean, this shouldn't have to come up in week 13, but
Exactly.
but if they come out and they just dismantle the Jaguars and go into the bye week with some momentum, there's a
That
chance
helps.
to salvage this season. Now, if they
Mhm.
come out flat and struggle against the Jaguars, who's they're essentially playing for draft position basically. It's just like Tennessee. These guys are vying for picking highly in the draft this upcoming 2025 draft. They come
Mhm.
out and struggle and barely beat them or even lose. You really got to come. You're really gonna have to like take a deep introspective look at yourself. Like, what are we doing?
What's
Because
going on?
the
Yeah.
season is going to be derailed at that point. Not derailed, but it is. It is really going to cause a firestorm as far as like public perception, the perception around the
Mhm.
city, like because they bought a lot of goodwill last season with some of the hires they made, the draft,
Mhm.
surprise team making a play, make it to the winning the division, making it to the playoffs, winning a playoff game against the number one defense. They had a lot of goodwill going into the season.
Yeah.
This year, if anyone's ever lived in Houston, Houston fans can be very fickle. It's just that it's just facts. I mean, you can't really prove it, but like if you've lived in the city long enough, like the fans are very fickle, and you can kind of see it a little bit on social media. Like again, like I mentioned my little rant earlier, like you have people on both sides of the fence, and there's the extreme optimists and the ones that are like fire everybody,
Yeah.
and then somewhere in the middle is everybody else, and it's gonna get really, really ugly online if they lose against Jacksonville.
Yeah. That would be an ugly one. So honestly, I'm gonna say the Texans win it. I hate to say that I think it's gonna be a close one. And it
No, I
shouldn't
agree.
be.
Yeah,
It
I
shouldn't
agree.
be. It shouldn't be. I think it's a close one. I think the Texans do get their 20 past their 20 points. So I'm gonna say the Texans get. I'm gonna say 21-17.
That's fair.
It's
Yeah,
a
I
safe
think
one. I know it's a safe call, but I'm gonna say the Texans still get the win over Jacksonville. 21-17. I think the defense steps up. There are gonna be some defensive mistakes. I think there's gonna be a lot of offensive mistakes as well. Maybe some Laramie Tunsil false starts. Maybe illegal shifts happening here. But overall, I can see, I can see how do you call it? Jacksonville still taking the loss on that one.
Yeah, no, I can see it being a close game, but I'm gonna be a little bit more which is a little feels a little weird to say. I'm gonna be a little bit more on the optimistic side on this one. I think maybe week 13 is the week that they finally wake up on offense. Because on paper, this team should be, averaging, upper 20s, if not the 30 points per game, but they have not been. I think this game, especially going into the bye, coming off a bitter loss against a bitter rival, and you have another division game coming up. I'm sure they're looking at that schedule and looking at the standings like they really can't afford to drop games. So I think the coach DeMeco get these guys finally fired up, and I think they have a convincing win. I'm gonna go 38-12 for Houston.
Yeah. I mean, how are we looking at the Jaguars against the run? Because I think if I'm not mistaken, I think they're ranked 26th against the run.
Yeah, Jacksonville their defense has been one of their Achilles heels this season.
Yeah, so I could see Joe Mixon having a big game on that one. I think it goes over 100.
Yeah, they should be able to. They should be able to control the trenches a little bit better against the Jaguars than they did against the Titans. The Jaguars aren't as stout up front, and their secondaries they are pretty susceptible to some deep shots. They just stay disciplined on those shifts. Don't shoot yourselves in the foot on those snap penalties.
Yeah. All right, there you go. That's going to be it for us this week, y'all. Take care. Check us out again. Subscribe to our YouTube channel at the B Blitz Pod right there. On Instagram again at B Blitz Pod, and of course our X account at B Blitz Pod. Thank you again for joining us. We will see y'all next week. That'll be it. Peace.